This is the J. Scott Outdoors podcast on Western big game hunting and fishing, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more. Go to GoHunt.com/insider and join today. I'm your host, Jay Scott, and I live and breathe hunting and fishing, spending half the year in the field experiencing God's creation. I hope you'll enjoy hearing about our adventures. Guys, welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today is part two with Craig Steele hunting the Monroe Mountain in Utah for archery elk, and you get to hear the conclusion of his hunt and how he harvested a great bull and all the things that went on with getting that bull. And I think you guys will be able to relate to the trials and tribulations of archery elk hunting and the ups and downs. But it's just an awesome episode. I want to thank Craig for being on. Guys, before we get to the episode, I want to make sure that you get your Arizona Big Game Super Raffle tickets for antelope, bear, buffalo, coos deer, desert bighorn sheep, elk, javelina, mountain lion, mule deer, and turkey. There's also a optics raffle, Swarovski optics raffle, and a New Mexico elk hunt. I want to be clear, all of this money goes back onto the ground in Arizona for the specific species. So all the money for antelope, $38,000 last year went to antelope, $7,900 to bear, $38,000 for buffalo, $28,000 for coos deer, $151,000 for desert bighorn sheep, $121,000 for elk, $6,900 for javelina, $7,300 for mountain lion, $96,000 for mule deer, and $14,000 for turkey. Every dollar raised goes directly to wildlife and wildlife management for the particular species. All of the operating expenses in this raffle are covered by our sponsors, and it's a real unique way to give back to the animals of the state of Arizona. Not only is it a great chance to win, but you know that if you don't win, and even if you do win, your dollars are going to an animal that we all love. So I want to encourage you. The deadline, I believe, is July 10th for the online, or excuse me, July 10th for the mail-in applications, and July 12th for the online applications. Okay, guys, the drawing is July 23rd, 2015 at the Arizona Game and Fish headquarters. You don't need to be present to win. If you win, winners will be contacted by phone during and immediately following the public drawing. A list of names along with their city and state will also be published on the website as soon as possible. This is a great way to support the state of Arizona and the animals we love. So guys, let's get right to the episode. I want to again thank Craig Steele for being on, and I want to wish all of you guys that have archery elk tags in your pocket this year, I want to wish you the best of success, and I want you to take it seriously. Elk tags don't come around very often. I want you to enjoy it and have fun, but know that this is a great opportunity for you to enjoy hunting, and I wish you the best of success. So let's get right to the episode. This is part two.
That can put up with my crap, because I'll just be.
Why does he put you in your place, or does he know you well enough to know when to talk and when not to talk?
Well, he knows me well enough that as your dad, you always have an ultimate respect.
Sure.
But he knows me well enough to know that I want to go, and sometimes I do things and I say things and I act a certain way, and it's not necessarily how I am, and I always come back and I'll always apologize in the heat of the moment if I say something that was disrespectful or I guess it just wasn't the right thing to say. It's kind of like playing a baseball game when you're really competitive. Sometimes you do and say things in the heat of the moment that you normally wouldn't do, and just your competitive, drive gets to you. And so they were going to go up, and we headed out and camped in two tents. We pulled up. We were going to hunt the east side. I was going straight in there. I was going to camp do exactly opposite of what I normally do. I was going to camp, really close to the elk. And we pulled up on the east side. It was raining. The monsoon had, kind of fired up. And it was raining, and we go.
Kind of fired up. Yeah. If that was 2013, I remember being in Unit 9 with Dar for about the first 7 days of September and just got absolutely pounded with rain.
Yeah, it was pounding, and I was just, kind of making light of it. But we set up camp, and, it was elk season, and, I threw my bow in the truck, or my Toyota 4Runner, and got my mom and dad in there. My mom was just going to hang out at camp, maybe go when she could, and just kind of, cook for us and whatnot. And my dad was just there to be support, to be a pickup man, my dad's a really good hunter. He's a really good old school hunter. I'd say if he'd adopted some of the newer tactics with glassing a little bit more consistently, and he was a little bit younger, maybe, put a little bit more value in how he hunted, I think I got a lot of my skills from him. So I have a lot of confidence, and he's usually an underjudger when he sees an animal. It's usually to him it's little big or little medium or big, and big's usually pretty big. But when we got to camp, we got it all set up. It was, we only had about an hour and a half left of daylight. And, the highway on the east side, which was Highway 62, I told my dad, I said, I can get somewhere, and then you can just run up and down and glass from this highway every morning, straight from the truck. And when we pulled down to the highway down by camp, we stopped, and I said, just do this. And I stood up, and I threw my tins, and I said, just glass these meadows up there. And I threw my tins up, and I seen a bull laying up there. I mean, and I'm not kidding anybody. I'm not exaggerating, telling fish stories here. I mean, it was like that. There's a bull right there. And there was like 5 bulls bedded out in this meadow. And the first bull I picked up looked really big. So I got my scope out.
You're in camp.
I'm just outside of camp. We just pulled to the highway. And I'm like, man, I got to get a closer look. So we drove around him, and I climbed out this little hill, and I got above him, and I seen this bull. And as soon as I see him, you'll see it on episode on 2013 No Excuses Utah Archery Elk Hunt #1. When I see this bull, I say in the video, I'm going to kill you. And that was what went through my mind. He had gobs of mass. I called him Mr. Heavy. And I thought, man, I was super lucky and super blessed to see that elk right there. And he had some cows right there, and those other bulls were kind of hanging off on him. They were a little bit lazy because this is the beginning of the rut. Come back down to the truck, and, I tell my dad, he's like, well, what is he? And I said, well, he's not that good. He's only about 340. And then he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, no, he's a freaking tank. We're going to hunt him in the morning. So I'm known for that. I do have a lot of fun on my hunts too, but when it's my own hunt, I'm super intense. But yeah, we go back. So we go back.
Okay, so Craig, is this September 1st roughly?
Yeah, it's roughly September 1st.
And when you crawled up on that knob, were they bugling around and kind of nosing around, or were they just kind of, the cows were over here and the bulls were over here?
They were nosing around. He was definitely with the cows. I didn't hear any bugles or see any bugles. Or any bulls bugling. He was with the cows, and then there was some other bulls floating around. So it wasn't like they were blowing and going right then. We went back to camp, obviously, that night, and then that night we heard some bulls bugling right by camp, and didn't think a whole lot of it. Thought we were going to get back up on this little hill, and we climbed up on that little hill. My dad climbed up there with me. Which, it took him a little bit longer, but he got up there. My dad's, for me, he wants to see me succeed. When you're a kid, no matter if they're, 33 or if they're 40 or if they're 10, you want to see your kid succeed. So and he had hip replacement surgery this last year and a knee replacement. So it tells you, he's going through a lot of pain to get up that hill. So I was pretty thankful because having another set of eyes up there, somebody to keep track of this bull if we found him. We headed up there in the dark, got up there, sat up there, and I was frantic at this point in time. I was like, okay, when is, this outfitter going to show up? When is this outfitter going to show up? When is, is there any other hunters down here? Surely somebody else is hunting this bull. Somebody else is hunting this country. And as daylight approached, we glass, and probably an hour went by and we couldn't turn that bull up. We turned some other bulls up, but we couldn't.
Craig, I want to interrupt you here real fast just to make a point. Here it is. You've got 8 days to hunt. Here it is. You saw a bull the night before that you want to hunt, and here you are hiking up the hill to glass the bull, not in the meadow or where the bull, the last place you saw him. And I think this is a very good point that the listeners need to hear from you, is that I'm anticipating you saying that you wanted to put your eyes on him this morning first before you go after him.
Exactly.
And tell me just a little bit why in your mind you didn't go into the meadow or the last place you saw him.
Because they move. They move, okay. And they move at night. It's not an antelope. It's not a sheep. They move at night. Rut activity will push them a number of places. And the second reason, I seen that bull, and I wanted to kill that bull. I didn't want to waste any time with any of the other bulls or chasing bugles at this point. I wanted to relocate him and kind of, follow him around and try to make sure that every opportunity I had was with that bull.
Okay, so before the hunt even started, after the first night of seeing him, 380 plus type bull, right?
Yes.
You said, that's the bull I want to kill. So then your mindset is, I want to get to where I can see that bull, and I want to isolate that bull. I don't want to get stuck down in the trees chasing bugles because I won't know if it's that bull or not.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. 100%. And an hour went by and we didn't find him. And we turned. I can't remember if it was me or my dad. Doesn't really matter. But we found him, and he was the bull that was bugling by camp. He'd moved about 2 or 3 miles, and he was out in the middle of this meadow. And I filmed him going across there and watched him. And he went south of camp, got in his little fingers. So we got in the truck and drove around, and my dad got up on another point, and then I got up on another point, and I watched him go in some thicker trees, but couldn't really tell where he's at. He had about 12 or 15 head of cows with him, and at this point, I'm kind of like deciding, okay, what do I want to do? And this is mistake number one right here. It was about 10:30 or so, and I decided to go back to camp. And I should have stayed up on the hill. I should have stayed with him. I should have sacrificed, lunch. I should have sucked it up, sipped on water, and just sat up on the hill. But we went back to camp only for about an hour. And the plan was, or an hour and a half, the plan was just grab a real quick bite to eat, and then my dad was going to go back to where I was, and I was going to go around, or he was going to drop me off. I was going to go around and get on a different knob to the west, and then he was going to go back to where we had left him and get up there. Well, what happened was it kind of cooled off, starting to come in. That bull had got up early, and by the time I got to where I wanted to be, the bull went back to the north, and we lost him that afternoon. So there's a big lesson there for guys. If you got a bull and you can definitely see where he's at, or any animal, you can see where he's at. Sometimes you just got to suck it up, and you just got to hang with him. Now, there's certain situations where you can go back to camp, but when you have a bull like this and he's in an area where you can lay eyes, you never know when that bull or that animal is going to do something that is just going to go right in your favor. So, not saying I wasn't going to get close to him and try to put a stalk on him, but just keep my eyes on him, to try to constantly maintain visual of the escape routes and where he was at, and I was glassing at him from a ways. So the next day come along, it's like, okay, we're going to go back and climb up on this big knob again, and we're going to try to relocate him again. And we did find him. He'd moved to the north, and it wasn't until that afternoon, my dad kept track of him that morning, And then that after...
I'm going to have to get this shocker out.
What's that?
I'm getting some bumping and rattling here.
Sorry about that.
No sweat.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my dad was keeping an eye on him on the second day, and then I slipped around him, took a road in the truck, got within probably about a mile of him, and then he was up in this little, kind of this little knockdown cut area, and I waited and waited and waited until that afternoon, and finally the wind got right to where I felt it was good enough that I was going to have a chance. And the meadow, or this knockdown area, was up on the side of the hill, so my dad couldn't actually see the elk. So I ran down and got to the east of them and come up in the trees. I actually, and this is another good topic, the wind was not in my favor until I got past the elk. But I had to go straight at the elk with the wind in their favor, but they were up in elevation enough that I felt the wind would take all my scent down the draw that I was walking in, and then I'd have to go past them and then cut back. And when I cut back, I come out of the trees, and I caught a couple of the cows out there at about 60 yards. And then they kind of went off this roll of this lip of this hill, and they disappeared. So I snaked my way through there, and I ended up getting like 30 yards from a couple bedded cows. And I had my arrow knocked, and I could see the bull just over this little rise. I could see his horns. And he come up, and he got within probably 45, 50 yards of me. And I drew back, and when I drew back, I stood up because I had to stand up to shoot over this little rise. And when I stood up, them cows stood up that were laying right next to me. And the bull stopped. I cow called, and the bull stopped facing away from me. And so, I had no shot. And then I didn't realize it was as steep as it was going off the other side, and he just walked straight off the hill. And I had to watch him go straight off the hill, and it got dark. The next day, it took us a little while to find him again, and we seen some other bulls. My dad actually located the bull that I actually killed and said, you need to look at this bull too, in case. But my heart was set on what I nicknamed this bull Mr. Heavy. My heart was set on him. And I remember, here's part of the competitive nature in me. I remember telling my dad, because he would not stop ranting and raving about this other bull. I just told my dad, if he's not as big as that bull, I don't want to hear about him. Because he was just like, you need to go look at this bull. You need to go look at this bull. I'm like, Dad, I don't.
Yeah. Stop even telling me about it. I'm focused on this bull. I don't want to take the focus away.
Exactly. So another day goes by, and I think I probably turned down a bull that I shouldn't turn down, but he had weak fists. He was real wide. He had huge fronts. In hindsight, looking at, he probably was as big, if not bigger, than a bull I killed, but he just didn't have big fists, so he just didn't wow me,
Okay, and so you've passed on some bulls. I want to get a perspective on, now it's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th of September. What is our bugling activity? I have 15 points in Utah, and one of the things that always makes me nervous is that it's, the season ends so early, usually around the 10th of September. What kind of bugling activity do we have in this situation?
It was light to moderate. There was bulls bugling, and occasionally you get one other bull. It wasn't like you had 10 other satellite bulls chousing the herd bull. You'd have a herd,
but enough to get on them and enough to work them.
Enough to get on them, and the total difference compared to Arizona is when they're not bugling and they're in that flat country, it's a pain in the butt. But when you can glass them from down below and they come out in those meadows, and I think part of it was the weather, it was a lot easier. It seemed like they came out a lot. And I'm not saying Utah Archery Elk Hunting is easier in Arizona, but what I'm saying is, for that,
more predictable.
For that stage of the rut, it was a lot easier to sit back and glass bigger bulls than I found in Arizona during that stage of the rut. When in Arizona, it usually seems like it needs to be blowing and glowing for you to be effective, at least in that country. Now, had I been hunting in the dark timber, it might have been a different story. But hunting in that low country where you could see up, that was my opinion. And it just felt like I seen a number of bulls from 340 to 360. You know, probably.
Okay, and so pretty good quality elk, and you had thunderstorms almost every day. So what you're saying is those meadows and such, those open areas, they became predictable, and they were out in those opens more than you thought that they might be because of the, kind of the storms and the rain and the cooler weather?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. And going back to the fourth day, actually it's the fifth. Now we're going to go on the fifth day because I just couldn't get Mr. Heavy in the right spot. I catch glimpses of him, couldn't get him in the right spot. On the fifth day, he showed up back in that same spot where I almost got a shot at him, and I made almost the same moves after him, and I had him at 60 yards, and they winded me, and that night, he kind of spooked pretty good. The next morning, we tried turning him. So now we're on the sixth morning. So I have 2 days left, counting the day I'm hunting, to hunt. We're on the sixth morning. It's calling for really heavy showers for the next 2 days. And it's about 8, 9 o'clock, and I can't turn him up. I can't turn him up. My dad can't turn him up. About 10 o'clock, my dad goes and mom goes back to camp, and I just told them, I said, I can't go back to camp. You guys go back to camp. I'm just going to keep glassing. So it was about noon, and I ran up north a little bit further, and I was actually in that country. I thought, okay, this is kind of the only place I haven't looked for him today or the last day and a half. And, I seen a couple bulls right away. They were out in the meadows. Up high, out in the meadows, about midway up the mountain, out in the meadows, but I seen some bulls up there looking, and then all of a sudden I catch a glimpse of this 6-point. And he had a good back end, and I knew that was the bull that my dad was talking about instantly. And I'm looking at him, and I'm going, I basically have a day and a half to hunt. And I thought at that point, that he was 360 to 380. And I know for some people that feels like, okay, how can you say 360 to 380? But what a lot of people, the normal novice type hunter doesn't understand is an inch on each tine and you can gain 12 inches. So I said 360 to 380 at that point in time because I wanted to give myself, some. At times I thought, okay, man, he looks big, but then, like, what's his body size? How old is he? I didn't see him around other bulls. And so it was just one of those things where I thought, man, he's a good bull, though. He's got a good back end. My goal was 350. So I actually called my dad and my mom on the phone. I said, hey, I got this bull. Come on up. By the time they got to me, they couldn't even see the bull. It was raining so hard. And I told them, I said, well, just watch that meadow up there. I'm going to go up after him. So I drove the truck up as far as I could get her, my Toyota up as far as I could get, or felt comfortable with, and ended up going up the hill probably about 3/4 of a mile to a mile. Got to the edge of the meadow where he was at, stopped in the trees, watched the bull. He was probably about 150 yards at this point. It's raining. I mean, I'm soaked. It's just the soaker. I mean, it is soaked. This bull did have about 3 cows, I believe, 3 or 4 cows. And when I got up to him, my gut said 360. But at that point, I'm 150 yards with a day and a half left of a 360 bull. Haven't seen Mr. Heavy in a day and a half. And I go into what I call kill mode with my bow. At this point in time, I'm in kill mode. I'm like, okay, all these calculations, all these things going on in my head, everything going on, I need to kill this bull. And so at that point in time, I'd shut down. There was no field judging or anything at that point in time. He is what he is, and I'm going to kill him. And he come out of the trees. he got up, he went into the trees for a little bit, and then he come out, he bugled once or twice, he come out and he fed for a little while, and then he bedded right out and it's wide open. There's knockdowns, or chainings in this meadow, so there's old dead stumps in there, and there's some sunflowers and stuff like that, and he was uphill from me. So I just said, it was raining, I'm just going to crawl right to him using these knockdowns, and he's out in this open. So it's like hunting a mule deer buck, you know. So I'm crawling right to him. I finally get, you know, he's every time he would turn his head and look the other way, I'd crawl a little bit further. I'm trying not to get my bow muddy. I'm just drenched to the core. And I get within 60 yards of him, and he stands up, and he starts feeding. So at this point, I felt good. You know, I've been bow hunting ever since I killed my first archery elk when I was 13. I've been bow hunting for a long time, and not that I'm the best bow hunter in the world. There's a lot of guys that can outshoot me completely, but I'd been shooting my bow out to 120 yards. Not that I'd shoot an elk at that far, but I felt if he was within 70 yards, I could kill him. I felt really confident. I will tell you that I feel even more confident. I really wanted that bull to be 60 yards and under. And if the closer, the better. So he was feeding, and he got to like 50 yards, but he never would present a shot. And then he turned and he walked right back up where he was bedded. I was on my knees. Everything was so wet because it was raining so hard. I was a little bit worried about my string and having so much water on my bow. When he come to my left back over where he was bedded, you know, I drew back, and when I shot, I squeezed. He was at 60 yards. He was completely broadside, or at least I felt he was completely broadside. And when I let go, my bow made just this hellacious twang. And it was all the water that was on my cables and string. And with that being said, I'm not going to make a huge excuse here. I think I gripped my bow and just torqued it a little bit to the right, which I have a tendency to do. And I immediately saw my arrow hit him, but it hit him way back, about 9-10 inches. And, and low. Which is good, but also it was way back. It may even be more back than what I'm recollecting right now. It might have been.
What'd the bull do when you hit him?
When I hit,
what was his first thing he did?
When I hit him, he ran about 10 steps and turned around and faced downhill directly at me. That point in time, I nocked another arrow, and I'm shooting the Montana black gold sights with a dial. And I dialed it up to 72 yards, got a range on 72 yards, but there was some sunflowers in the way. And at this point, and this is my personal opinion, whenever you have a hit animal, I want to get another arrow in him.
Wherever you can hit him, right?
Yes. At that point in time, you want to get another arrow. I felt I gut shot him, and so I was going to shoot him head on at 72 yards. And I drew back, and I just couldn't find a lane, because of the sunflowers were so high and I was downhill. And the bull wheeled and took off. And I was shaking, of course. I got back down to my pack, called my parents on the radio, said, hey, I'm coming back down. I said, did you get to watch it? They said, no, we didn't see anything. We can't. It was raining, you know. I mean, it was socked in, but, you know, I was in that kill mode. I didn't have any idea what was going on other than I was going after this bull. Go back down to the truck. One thing about my dad, he's always a positive person when it comes to tracking. He's a really good tracker, especially when he's younger and he could go. We get down to the truck, and, you know, he's like, I'm like, well, I hit him, but I hit him way far back. And he's like, well, you got him. He's dead. You know, he's dead. Don't worry about it. He's dead. You know, and all the doubts are creeping in my head. Now, I set out to stalk that bull probably about 2:30. It's now pushing 5:30, 6 o'clock. You know, so I'm thinking liver at best. So I'm thinking a minimum of 2 hours waiting. But we also have this storm. So I tell my dad, and I've been on many, I'm sure you have as well. I've been through many experiences where I've seen guys, and I've also been the guy, I'm not going to say I'm a saint, to push the issue and push. When you're bow hunting, that's one of the biggest difference between rifle and bow hunting is, and a lot of guys that convert over from rifle hunting, they don't understand that you have to give an animal time. You may think you can go up there and get another arrow in him, but if it's a suspect shot, you have to give him time. And so I told my dad, I said, you know what, let's just go back to camp. And so we went back to camp, and we're sitting there, and, by now, all the doubt's creeping in my head, and I'm blogging all at the same time. So everybody knows everything that's going on. And, all these doubts are coming in my head. Like, I just shot this bull and I might not find him, And so when we were sitting at camp, it's raining. We're having I don't even know if I ate or what, but I know we made the decision that we were going to leave until the next day. And that was super, super hard. I'm sitting there in my tent by myself. My parents are staying in the other tent, hearing the rain. All the doubts are going through my head. Like, I'm not even going to be able to track this bull. It rained all night. So we get up next morning bright and early. We're there where I left we're up there as far as the road can go at the crack of daylight. My dad, he's packed up, and he's ready to go to. I left another arrow right where the bull was standing at the end. When we literally got up to where the bull was standing, I couldn't see tracks. We were 2 inches taller in our boots because of all the mud, and it was like, where do we go? What do we do?
So you couldn't even see any track at all?
I couldn't see any track at all. It rained so much. I don't know how much it rained, but we couldn't see any track.
At that point, did your heart just sink?
At that point, I thought, I don't know what's going to happen. There was a lot of doubt. And what had actually happened is once we got to the trees, or right before we got to the trees, we cut a couple fresh bull tracks from after the rain. And we got on them for about 30 yards to the edge of the meadow. And I turned and looked at my dad and I said, this can't be his. And he's like, no, these aren't his. These are just an hour ago, And so we turned around, we came back to where the arrow was, and then we went to the edge of the trees, and then we could see a little bit of indentations where the cows had ran. And we just anticipated that he hooked up with those cows, that they went out together. So we started on those tracks, and it was downhill, so it made all the sense in the world. This bull's hit, he's sick, he's going to go downhill, because I buried it to the fletching, and I'm shooting a 32-inch draw length. My arrow's 28, 29 inches. It's buried to the fletching, so I got great penetration. This bull's hurt and he's sick. I actually was anticipating the bull being alive the next morning. We trail these indentations, if you want to call it, down into this draw. It takes us a better part of 4 or 5 hours to make it a half mile. And we get to this next little open meadow, and we lose everything in the open meadow because there it's exposed to the rain. And we kind of think we trail this bull or elk, some sort of elk, to the edge of that opposite side of the meadow, and then we jump up a couple of cows in the draw. So I look at my dad and I said, damn, those have got to be his cows, And we make it a little bit further and nothing. And so then I start doing circles. My dad stays right there. I start doing circles. And this is going to be full uncensored. So this is the truth. I hit my knees and then, I start praying, and I'm like, God, just give me a sign what to do here, because it's noon now and it's pretty warm. because it never cooled off because of the rain. It's noon here. What do we do? And where do we go? And just give me a sign. Just give me something here. I want to put this bull out of his misery. I want to find him, and I walk back down to my dad, and, I tell him, I said, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Something just doesn't feel right. Just stay here. Something doesn't feel right. So the whole time I'm walking back down the middle, down to the beginning where my arrow was at, where I shot the bull, I'm praying over and over again, like, God, just give me a sign. Give me something. Give me something. We need something. And I get to the arrow and nothing. And I'm like, it's 12:30. I'm like, this is not good. I'm not going to find this bull. So the only thing I can think of for the next day and a half, as much time as I have, I'm going to be looking for crows, and doing circles here. So for some reason, you can call it whatever it is, and I know what I believe it is. For some reason, I looked down at those elk tracks and I thought, why not? I just follow these fresh 2 bull tracks that we had backed off of that morning because they were fresh. And I start following them, and I get to the edge of the meadow, uphill into the trees, and they're still going. So I'm like, crap, I'm just going to follow these 2 bulls. And one bull breaks to the right, and another bull breaks to the left. And I'm walking through this thick stuff. We're probably only 25 yards from where we stopped earlier and backed off these tracks. And I walk through this, just an opening that's just super tiny. And I literally just duck underneath this juniper. And when I come out, because I had my eyes closed, and this is not bull crap, when I come out, my bull's laying right there, dead. And so at that point, I hit my knees, say thank you, and I just start screaming. I'm screaming on the radio, I went from, 0 to hero real quick. Had nothing to do with tracking skill. I'd say that it was all
divine intervention.
It was all God, and it was all perseverance that, that enabled us to do that. Shot was far back. The bull had only gone 50 yards. The arrow had hit the rib and angled up in him. That bull was dead within 15 minutes.
So did it hit the liver?
It went up through the liver and hit the opposite side lung. The bull didn't go 50 yards from where I'd seen him, but, it was 30 yards to the edge of the meadow, and he was another 25 yards, so to 30 yards, so maybe 50 to 60 yards into the thick trees. It was it was super thick. And we were.
So were the tracks that you followed were the right set of tracks that you followed?
No, they weren't. They were not. They were 2 satellite bulls that had smelled that bull up.
Gotcha.
And that just was a lesson learned there. That in that situation, exhaust all avenues, and it was the worst case tracking scenario that I've ever been on. And the shot wasn't good from my skill set, or from a skill set standpoint, or from a shot placement. I just lucked out, and it glanced off a rib and shot up in him, angled up in him instead of going straight through him. And it would have been a liver. It actually ricocheted and went off and went up in him. So, very blessed, and that bull was right at 360. Somehow, and this is going to be, at the time when I got back to camp, I scored him at 369 and 7/8. I just scored him the other day, and he was right at 360. So it was one of those things where I don't know if it was excitement or what, and it's not official score, but he was right. He was above my goal, which was 350. He was right at the lower end of what I thought he was, and he was a young bull. So the one thing I do love about Utah is I had to send in a tooth, and they aged the bull, and he was 6.5 years old.
Nice. I wish Arizona did that. I think that would be phenomenal from a learning perspective. I'm always so interested in, age and maturity and stuff, and it's something that, I really don't know a lot about, and it seems like I always want to know, but it's a constant learning process on that. But that's cool that you got your bull aged, and yeah, he's a heck of a bull, and that was a great story.
And real quick, after the hunt last year, a kid got hold of me from Utah, and he sent me some pictures. He'd seen the video, and I feel bad because I can't remember his name. But this is just kind of going into, a little bit of how bulls will travel. He sent me some pictures. They had trail camera pictures of Mr. Heavy way up on top of the mountain. And I looked at where he kind of gave me the vicinity where the trail camera pictures were from, and then where I had hunted him from. That bull had moved 12 miles. They had put so much scouting time into that bull early, they could never relocate him during the hunt. And then they had 2 archery hunters and I believe a rifle hunter. The bull had moved 12 miles, and hear me, I didn't, it wasn't like I, was some superhero here and had superpowers and found this bull. Some of it was just being in the right place at the right time, being blessed. But just goes to show you that, like you and I talk a lot, unless you have the means to keep track of a bull, when they move, 8, 10, 20, 30 miles, it's almost monetarily and time-wise and physically impossible to keep track of a bull like that when you're limited on time and money,
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, unless you can cover every single water source in your unit all summer and during the whole hunt, there's really no way to pattern a bull that you get all summer long in velvet, because they're going to move. 99% of those bulls are going to move, and in Arizona, they're going to move, I'm going to say minimum 5 miles, but realistically 10 to 15 miles. That's my experience.
Yeah.
And it's great farther to get, there's cases. I was talking with the A3 guys. I think Jay and Chad said they had one that moved 21 or 25 miles or something from one unit to another, and I know that happens all the time. But for the general guy that's going to run 8 or 10 trail cameras in the summer, I think it's fantastic to, keep your energy level up and your excitement and to get a potential inventory of what's in your unit. But the reality is, in my opinion, you cannot pattern velvet bulls to kill that when a hunt starts September 15th.
No.
Now, if you run your cameras all the way through September, in through the rut during the hunt, that's another thing, because then you're getting intel and data for, where the animals are at during that exact time. But phenomenal story, awesome bull. I look forward to my hunt in Utah one of these days. Do you have anything to add about your experience in Utah before we conclude today?
It was, for me personally, my own hunt. I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I've had 5 archery elk tags in Arizona. That Utah hunt, from when I was an adult standpoint, was probably the best hunt, the elk hunt of my own that I've ever had. And the reason being is because I didn't have pressure. I didn't have the pressure of so many people, the hunt pressure. There was only 7 tags, and it seemed like all those general archery deer hunters and all that traffic kind of, by the end of the hunt, had kind of settled down. And so only the limited entry archery bull tag hunters were actually hunting, and there was nobody hunting. I didn't see a soul in a lot of that country. And to me, that is just hindsight looking back at it. That just makes for just a great experience. I'm all in to kill big animals, but I'm also in it to, have a great experience. And I think, hunt quality was awesome. I love some of Arizona's, just bugle fest when they are bugle fest. But it just seems like anymore. We're just pumping so many tags in some of these archery elk hunts, it kind of takes away from the actual experience. So that's my final closing thoughts.
And one closing thought I will have with listening to your story is, and it usually brings so much emotion with me listening to something like that. And the thing that jumps out at me is having reliable hunting partner.
Yeah.
And while your dad may be getting older and maybe he can't walk like he used to be able to walk, anybody into the ground, so to speak, you've got someone that's reliable.
Yeah.
You've got someone that you come back to camp. You've got your mom and dad there. They're cooking. They know that you're putting everything out on the field and that you're an emotional wreck and that you're, going at it 1,000,000 miles an hour. But I think that's the value of having someone in your camp that's your rock and that you can rely on to know that, you're a wreck and that they can level you out and that they can be somewhat your voice of reason. And, I think that's a benefit, whether it's your parents or your brothers or, your sister or a good friend, to have someone that knows you well, that knows that, in the heat of battle, you're going to yell at them. You're going to say things that are completely unnecessary, bad timing, what have you, and they just smile, keep doing. And your dad, you probably snapped at him a few times. He could have said, you know what, I'm going to sleep in. I'm not even going to go out and glass for you. But having good people help you on hunts that love you and that, want you to do better than you want to do yourself is a huge value. And I think a lot of times people get in camps where there's tons of guys and they can't get that intimate feeling that you have in camp when everybody's focused on the hunter trying to get the best animal he can. When you have a group of 7, 8 guys in a camp, it's fun and you get some camaraderie and that stuff. But when you're trying, when you have limited time and you're trying to kill something big or trying to have the best hunt you can, sometimes it's nice just to have 1 or 2 guys around. And, I take that away from listening to your story.
No, definitely. That I would agree and concur to all that. It's definitely, and when, going back to my dad with, even though he wasn't, a 25-year-old kid that could go and just do everything, or even my age and do everything, I knew the expectations. I knew what he could and what he couldn't do. And I knew where he would be, and I, like you said, I had that trust factor, and that's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
So.
And I think from my own perspective, people often ask, how Dar and I do so well on some of our hunts, and the reality is we fight like cats and dogs, and we fight like brothers, and we, constantly are arguing with each other and debating and what have you. But the reality is, having a good hunting partner, I know exactly where Dar's going to be, and he knows exactly where I'm going to be, because we've been around each other enough that you can rely on someone and you get to know someone's habits, and you get to know, and it's as a hunter, having a good hunting partner and a guiding partner is awesome, because even though it just gives you the sense that you know where your buddy's going to be. You know that if he tells you, hey, I'm going to be over here, you know that he's covering that country. You don't have to worry that, hey, maybe the bulls aren't here, maybe they're over there. Well, your buddy's over there covering that, and you can rely on him. And, that's an invaluable. I mean, you can't. It's priceless. You can't place a monetary or any type of value on having a reliable hunting partner. So,
for sure,
Craig, it was awesome listening to your story about your Utah elk hunt. It's always great having you on. And just look forward to seeing you guys' success with your antelope hunts and your over-the-counter deer hunts and your elk seasons that you guys, and the sheep stuff you guys have coming up. So I'm sure I'll be chatting at you soon, but I just thank you for supporting the podcast like you do and being a friend of the podcast, and we wish you the best of success here.
All right, Jay, you have a good day.
All right, buddy.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the J. Scott Outdoors Western Big Game Hunting and Fishing Podcast, brought to you by GoHunt.com Insider. Research faster, hunt more, Go to gohunt.com/insider and join today.